Today's daf, we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf tzadichet. Today's daf is sponsored by Hillel Gray in loving memory of Razel Shoshana bat Rachel Perel on her shloshim. She loved reading, teaching others to read, and Jewish education. Today's daf is sponsored by Abby Flamholtz in honor of her daughter-in-law Sigal's Hebrew birthday. She continues to be a constant inspiration to me, and especially to her daughters and husband. Happy birthday, Sigal. Okay, we're going to get started now with our continued discussion about the Mashiach. So now we're dealing with this machloket between first Rav and Shmuel, then we saw it was actually a Tannaitic debate between Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Yoshua, which is whether the people need to do tshuva. Is that what's going to bring the redemption, or is God going to decide the time is coming for the Mashiach, and is going to bring the Mashiach anyway? And then we learned, what does that really mean? Well, the people are going to need to do tshuva, but because God kind of forces it upon them, right? He'll bring an enemy, and that will cause people to do tshuva, and then God will bring the Mashiach. We're going to see other things about this theme throughout the daf today, and a lot going back to some of the things we discussed before about what are signs for the impending Mashiach. Some are going to be good, some are going to be bad signs. So let's read from the top of our daf. We're still in this discussion between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, each bringing psukim. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer, halo kfar ne'emal, im tashuv Yisrael ne'um Hashem, elai tashuv. If the Jewish people return, God says, then they will return to me, meaning kind of like I will return to them and right, I will redeem them. So there it sounds like it's dependent on repentance. Amar lo Rabbi Yehoshua, v'lo kfar ne'emal, v'ashma ta'ish levush habadim, and I heard this person who was wearing linen, asher mimal me'al yaor, it was above the yaor, v'yarem yimino smolo al hashamayim, v'yishava b'chayei ha'olam, and he took this oath. And this, by the way, we saw the translation of the rest of this, the next part of this pasuk in yesterday's daf. We saw the targum of it in Aramaic. Ki lamoed moadim v'chetzi, right? 2.5 times that's the amount of time they're going to be in bond, right? They're going to be suffering until I redeem them, right? Which we said was likely, right? 2.5 times the amount of years that they were in Egypt. Now here's the key, right? And when all this finished, well, the key was a minute ago when we said moadim, moadim b'chetzi. There's a certain time period that has to pass. And then when that's done, right, techlena kol elu, all these problems will be behind them, and then the Mashiach will come, salvation. So there you see, it's a very set time. Now, before we get to the next few words, I just want to point out there was something a little different in this debate between them, each one bringing a pasuk than when we usually see between them or Amoraim debating. So one brings a pasuk, and then he says, well, what does that one do with your pasuk? Here we don't do that. Each one kind of brings his pasuk, and it's like they're each operating on a different track, and no one's really listening to the other. However, at the end, it says, V'shatak Rabbi Eliezer. When Rabbi Yehoshua pulled out that pasuk, where it seems very clear there that there's a set time where God is going to bring the Mashiach, then Rabbi Eliezer realized that it sounds like he was wrong. Okay, although we're going to see, maybe he wasn't completely wrong, because we're going to get to, Becky, what you were asking about after class, it's coming. We're going to get to, how this exactly is going to work. But I'm a Rabbi Abba. Okay, so we're stopping with this topic for right now. And now we're going to go back to all the signs of Mashiach coming, which again, some will be, as we call Chevlei Mashiach. And today we'll see that we're finally inside, which are, the pangs, like what do you call it? The labor pains of the Mashiach coming. And some are good signs. ואמר רבי אבא, אין לך קץ מגולה מזה, שנאמר, ואתם הרי ישראל, עמתכם תיתנו ופריכם תישאו לעמי ישראל. Okay, it says, and you, right, it's describing all this plenty. There's going to be tons of fruits on the trees or produce growing in the ground, and that's really going to be the sign of Mashiach coming. Okay, right, because it says, the end of that pasuk is ki kervu lavo. That means the time is coming. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, or Rabbi Elazar Omer, Af mizeh shene'emar ki lifnei hayamim hahem. Okay, now here, before those days, this is going to be talking about bad things that are going on. Schar ha'adam lo niyeh. Okay, people won't be able to make a salary. V'schar ha'behema inena, and they won't be able to rent out their animals. Layotzeh v'laba ein shalom minatzal. To those who go in and out, there is no peace from the tragedies that are going to befall them. So, my liyotzeh v'ba ein shalom minatzal, what does that mean? What's it referring to? Rav Amar Av Talmidei Chachamim Shekatuv Behem Shalom. Right, even Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, where they're called peace. Okay, where do we see that? Shalom Rav Lo Ave Toratecha. There should be great peace for those who love your Torah. So those who learn Torah are considered generally they have peace, but they ain't Shalom Mipnei Tsar. They will not. Okay, they will suffer just as much. Ushmuel Amal, he has a different explanation. Yotzei v'ba, okay, Yotzei v'ba, he says what goes in and what goes out. Ad shiyu kol ha'sharim kulam shkulim. He basically says that there's going to be, all the prices are going to be the same. The rates of the prices everywhere will be the same. Okay, what does this mean? Good question. There's a lot of different interpretations. Some say what it means is that no one will be, it goes back to not making money, because usually how do you make money? You buy something for cheap and you sell it for more expensive. People won't be able to do that because all the prices are the same everywhere. And there'll be nowhere to buy anything cheaper. Some people say, and this goes back to some things we talked about yesterday, that it just shows that things are going to be very different from what is normal, and so much so that it's a completely unrealistic. It's going to be a very unrealistic world, okay? Very hard for us to imagine. And then they explain it as all the prices for everything is the same, right? You're going to go and buy expensive things for cheap, or cheap things for expensive, or not clear whether they'll be very high prices or very low prices, but all the prices will be the same for every item you want to buy in the store. That's obviously strange. Anyway, there's a bunch of different interpretations what exactly this means. I'm a Rabbi Chanina. Another sign. Not a good one. Ein bein David ba. We're going to see this phrase. I didn't count how many times, but if anyone wants to, you can count. Ein bein David ba. Okay, Ella or ad che. Okay, meaning the Mashiach is not going to come until the following thing happens. Ad yitbakesh dag, and it should be dag katan lachole. Okay, by me it doesn't say it, but on the side it does. Until they look for a small fish for someone sick. Even one small fish they won't be able to find. Shneimar, here's a pasuk that explains. As ashkia mimehem v'narotam keshemen olich. Okay, so things will sink in the water, and the nar, it'll be like oil. Okay, meaning nothing will live in the water, right? Fish can't live in oil, even though tuna fish sits in oil, but no, we're not talking about fish living in oil. So basically, some people say the water's going to freeze and there'll be no life able to be there, even though freeze is not exactly like oil. But basically, the waters are not going to be the same, and there will be no fish. Now, what does this have to do with Mashiach? K'tiv batrei bayom hahu atzmiach keren lebei Yisrael, and on that day, right, I will raise the keren of Israel. Right, the Jews will be back in prominence. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, ein bein taviba ad shtechle malchut hazala Yisrael, until the malchut, that is now zol, is cheap. Either it means even the Jews won't be ruled even by a small kingdom, or maybe it means the one that is mizalzel, the one that is the worst, won't rule the Jews anymore. Usually they mean the Romans in their day. Shenemal the karata zalzalim b'mazmerot. Okay, here's a description. What will happen? Now this is a good thing, obviously, that the zalzalot, the ones who are mizalzel, or right, who are or who are terrible or disgraceful, will be cut with mazmerot. Those are pruning shears. Uktiv batrei. Now, what does this have to do with the Mashiach? Because then it says, "Ba'eta hi yuval shai Hashem tzvaot am memushach u'morat." Okay, the nation that is scattered and hairless, because the non-Jews have pulled out all their hairs. Okay, they will on that day be brought as a gift to God, meaning they'll be brought back to Jerusalem. Okay. Amar Ze'eri Amar Rabbi Chanina. Ein bein David ba'ad shechalu gasei haruach miYisrael. Now we're switching gears a little bit, and it's unclear whether what they're saying is we have to do this to make it happen. Like we should stop being arrogant. Okay, gasei ruach is arrogance. When there's no arrogant people, then the Mashiach will come. So again, maybe this means, right, some of these things are just signs that are going to happen, and we don't do anything to make them happen. This perhaps is saying we have to get rid of all the arrogant people among us, and we'll see all the other things that are going to come in this list. So they're a little bit different than the previous. So basically, these are things that not that they're signs, but again, it's both. It's number one, they have to be gone before the Mashiach can come. Like the Mashiach can't come until this happens. And basically, it's also a sign. If you see there's no more arrogant people, it's a sign that the Mashiach is coming. Shene'emal, ki az asir mikirbech alize gavatech. Okay, because it says, and then I will I will take away from you, right? Now, here it sounds like God will do it. God will remove from among us all the arrogant people. So that's why I said it's not exactly clear. Is this upon us to do, or is it just, again, another sign? When God does this, that'll be a sign the Mashiach is coming. Uchtiv, visharti bekirbech, am ani vidal, vechasu b'shem Hashem. Now, here's the idea that this is the redemption, because it says you'll only have a poor nation, meaning people who aren't arrogant. V'chasu, meaning chasu b'shem Hashem, they'll be covered, they'll be protected in the name of God, and that's again future redemption. Amar Rabbi Simlai Mishum Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Ein bein Davi ba'ad shichlu kol shoftim v'shotrim Yisrael. We're going to have a complete turnover of judges. Okay, Shenemal Shiva Yedi Alayich Ve'etzrof Kabor Sigay. Now it doesn't say are they bad judges who are going to be removed, or is it just going to be like a turnover, a complete turnover? But it does seem to be saying, especially because of the pasuk they choose. What is this pasuk? It's a very famous pasuk from Yeshayahu, the first chapter. Ashiva Yadai Alayich, right? I will bring my hand back to you. Ve'etzrof Kabor Sigay. I will take. These are the impurities out of the metals, like the silver and the gold and all that. There's always impurities in them. I will clean out the impurities. God is basically saying, I'm going to take out all the bad, right? So all the bad judges, the corrupt judges, will be cleaned out and they'll be removed. V'ashiva shoftayich, and I will bring back your judges. Okay, this is where we get Hashiva shoftenu kevo yishona, right? It comes from here in our tefillot, in Shmon Esrei. I just wanted to see one thing, right? It says in that pasuk, Hashiva shoftayich kevo yishona v'yotzayich kevatchila. Okay, and then it says, Acharei ken yikarelach ir hatzedek Kiryan Emana. Okay, and then the city will be the city of righteousness, of justice. Okay, and this is basically describing a time in the future. Amar Ula, and we're going to come back to this pasuk soon also, by the way. Ein Yerushalayim nifdeit ela b'tzedakah. Jerusalem will be redeemed with charity. Shneimar Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaveha b'tzedakah. It's weird here because it's really b'mishpat tipadeh, and it says it will be redeemed with tzedakah, which is the second part of the pasuk. But first of all, the word Tzion b'mishpat tipadeh and shaveha b'tzedakah, also it's where the verb is missing there. It's the same verb as the beginning one. Some people actually have a different girsa which says they'll be redeemed and they'll be not like geula and not pidia, and that maybe works a little better. But either which way, they're focusing on the tzedakah here, which seems to mean here charity. Even though tzedakah could come from tzedek, righteousness or justice, but here it seems to mean charity, which again is somewhat telling us do charitable things, and maybe that will help bring the geula. But again, it's not clear. Amar Rav Papa. And here it seems to be saying that maybe this really is upon us. If we get rid of the arrogant people, batle amgoshe, then the amgoshim, which are the Zoroastrian leaders, right, from the Persians, they will be removed from us. And ibatle dayane, if we get rid of dayanim, batle gizir pate. Okay, then these other rulers of the Vdei Kochavim will be gotten rid of. Where do we get this from? Okay, so they say I will clean you out and I will remove all the bedilayich, those who separate. Now they say the ones who separate are the amgoshim. They separate themselves from God and from truth. Okay, your enemies. So there you have it. In other words, if you're Hasira Hashem Mishpatayich, if he gets rid of all the bad judges, then we'll be able to have, he will also get rid of all the enemies. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. But like I said, it's tricky here because it's unclear whether it's an imperative for us to do or it's something God will do for us. It will just be, though, will go hand in hand. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Im ra'ita dor shemitmalech v'holech, mitma'et v'holech, if you see a generation that's getting smaller and smaller, chakelo, wait for the Mashiach, meaning the Mashiach is coming. Shenemar be'et am ani toshia. Okay, because God will help a poor nation, okay, who will save the nation when they're poor. Okay, this is also, by the way, part of this is wanting people to keep the hope for the Mashiach alive. And part of it is also giving hope to people when they're in a terrible situation. It's saying, oh, when things are terrible, don't worry. That's a sign, right? It's like saying also things can't get any worse, right? So they're only going to get better. I think it's a way of providing hope for people when they were struggling with difficult times, as we can very much relate to. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Im ra'ita dor shetzarot rabot ba'ot alav kinahar, if you see a generation where there's lots of terrible things happening, like a river, meaning what happens with a river, it just doesn't stop. It keeps going and keeps going. Chakelo. Know them, right? Wait for the Mashiach. Shene'emar ki yavo kinahar tzal, u'ach Hashem nosesa, v'samach le'u ba'al etzion goel. Okay, when it comes like a narrow river, it's the ruach of God, right? And then it says u'ba'al etzion goel, and the Redeemer will come to Zion. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, ein ben David ba ela b'dor shekulo zakai o kulo chaya. Here we have the famous, either the generation will be completely worthy, or the generation will be completely unworthy. And now we say, how do we know this? B'dor shekulo zakai d'chtiv, going back to the first pasuk we quoted in our Mishnah, in the first Mishnah of the chapter, va'ameh kulam tzadikim lo'olam yirshu aretz. Now we're going to darshan this differently than the Mishnah did, which is, when they are all tzaddikim, then they will inherit the land. But God saw there was no man. And it was shmama, it was desolate because there was no one. Remember, mafkia is to pray. There was no one to pray, meaning it was pretty bleak. Now you have to read the rest of the pasuk. It then says, "Vatoshalo," and God will come, and toshami lashon Yeshua, right? The salvation will come. Uchtiv, and it also says another pasuk, Lemania said it. In the end, God will do it for his own name. In other words, if we're not worthy, God will bring the Geulah. So there's two possible ways the Geulah can happen, either because we're worthy or because we're so unworthy that God will come and do it for his own sake. Now, here comes the famous line. Amar Rabbi Alexandri, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi Rami. So Rabbi Alexandri comes and says, and tells us about Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi threw these two pasukim against each other, meaning it's actually one pasuk, saying these two words in the pasuk contradict each other. What does it say? Tiv bi'ita, it says in its time. Uktiv, there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu. Uktiv achishena. Okay, so bi'ita means in its time. Achishena means I will speed it up. It will come quicker. So how can you possibly say that and that? Zachu achishena, lo zachu bi'ita. If they're worthy, now we're going to learn, it's true there's two tracks. Two tracks are different. Okay, besides they're going to come differently, they're going to come at different times. If we're worthy, that will speed in the coming of the Mashiach. If we are not worthy, then it will come when it's supposed to come. Amar Rabbi Alexandri, another Rabbi Alexandri, again quotes Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, the same idea but two different psukim. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi Rami threw two psukim against each other. K'tiv va'aru im anan ishmaya kibar inish ate. The Mashiach will come with the clouds of the sky, and it will come like in the form of a person. And basically that means like flying, right? And it's going to come quickly. Uktiv ani v'rochev chamor, right? That looks like some, angel coming from the heavens. And the other says he's going to be poor and he's going to ride on a donkey, right? The famous that the Mashiach's coming on a donkey. So, zachu iman neshmaya, lo zachu ani rochev chamor. Okay, the form of the Mashiach and how he's going to come and how quickly he's going to come, again, is going to depend on our action. Amale Shabur Malka l'Shmuel. Now talking about this donkey, Shabur Malka, who's the king of the Persians, who had a good relationship with Shmuel. We've seen it a bunch of times them in conversation. He says to Shmuel, Amarita Mashiach al-Chamarati. They say your Mashiach is coming on a chamor, on a donkey. Why don't I give him a really good horse that I have? Horse is much more respectful than a donkey. Amar le, I don't know what to do with this line, but mi la bar chevar gavne. Do you have a horse with 100 different, and I think there's two different versions, whether it's 100 or 1,000 different shades of color on it? Our donkey has 1,000 or 100 different shades of color. I don't know what that means exactly. And, if you have a horse like that, then fine. But our donkey is going to be, a nice donkey, a special donkey. Okay, now we get to a famous story. And if you went to the Hebrew Museum for Bava Batra last time, Dr. Pradina Neuwirth spoke about this specific midrash, and if you want, you can go back and listen if your Hebrew is good. Specifically analyze this midrash, and from a psychology perspective, it was really interesting. I'll mention a little bit of what she said. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi eshkachei leEliyahu dehabakai apitra demarata de Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi goes to the opening of the cave where Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was in the cave, right? Your generations before him. And who does he find there? Eliyahu Hanavi. Okay, so he goes to like the holy, we call it a holy place, and Eliyahu Hanavi appears. Okay, which could happen in a holy place. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi sees Eliyahu. Amarle atina la'alma da'ate. So what's the question? If you meet Eliyahu, what are you going to ask him? So yes, am I going to make it to Olam Haba? Okay, am I going to make it to the world to come? Amar le, im yirtzeh Adon hazeh. If God wants. Okay, good answer. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says about what happened when he was at the cave. Shnayim ra'iti v'kol shlosha shamati. I saw two people, but I heard three voices. Okay, now I think he means two, meaning him and Eliyahu, but he heard a third voice, meaning the divine presence was with him. Amar le emat ate Mashiach. So then he decides, let me ask another question. When does the Mashiach come? Amar le zil shayle ledide. Eliyahu says, go ask the Mashiach himself. Okay, so vehechayativ, where is the Mashiach that I would find him? Apitra. Okay, now you're missing an important. If you're ever regular Gemara, you're probably missing an important word. Okay, it should be apitra de carta de Romi. In the entrance, not the. Now notice entrance, not the entrance to the cave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, where you might have thought the entrance to the city of Rome. Which now Rome was full of terrible things, terrible people, right? The least expected place. That's where you'll find the Mashiach. Umay simane. How will I know? How will I know to identify him among all the people? Imagine how many people are sitting in the gates of Rome. He's sitting among these poor people who are suffering. Okay, we'll get to later also. The Mashiach seems to be a character who suffers. Everyone's taking off their bandages and then putting them back on. What do? They take off all their bandages at once, and then they put them all back on one by one. Ihu, but he's different. He takes off one and puts it back, puts a new one on. Takes off the next one, puts the new one on. Amar, Dilma mibiina delo Yaakov. I might be called to come and I can't delay. So if I take them all off and then I'll have to put them all back on before I go run to be the Mashiach, I have to be ready at all times. Again, this puts it, the theory about Mashiach could come at any moment. Azal Likabe. So of course, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi goes to Rome. And Amar Le, he finds him. He says, Shalom Alecha Rabbi Umari. Okay, easy to identify him. He says, Shalom Alecha, my teacher, my rabbi, my teacher. Amar Le, Shalom Alecha Bar Levi. And he says to him, Shalom to you, the son of Levi. Remember, his name is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Okay, now, obviously, it's clear the Mashiach knew him. Shouldn't come as a surprise. Amar Le, Avtecha lach v'la'avuch la'alma da'ate. Oh, sorry, I skipped. Sorry, he doesn't say that. That's the next line. Amarle le'emad atemar. So first he just says Shalom alecha bar Levi. Amarle le'emad atemar. So he says, when are you coming? So Amarle hayom. He says, I'm coming today. Wow, Mashiach is coming today. Very exciting. So now Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi goes back to Eliyahu. Amarle my amarlach. He said, what did he say to you? Amarle Shalom alecha bar Levi. First thing he said was Shalom to you, bar Levi. Amarle evtechach lach v'lavuch la'amid ata. That's a sign that he's saying, because he's connecting you also, he's mentioning your father's name, and he's trying to tell you, Shalom Alecha, peace will be to you, and Bar Levi, your father, meaning you're both going to make it into the world to come. Amalei, Shikure Kashakerbi, but he lied to me. Amarli Hayomatina Veloate. He said he was coming today, and he didn't come. Amarle, Hachi Amarlach. What he said to you was, you didn't understand it properly. He said, Hayom im b'kalo tishma'u. Today, if you listen to God's word. In other words, any day is a possible day the Mashiach will come. And what Penina did with the Shiur was very interesting. First of all, she compared it to kol dodido fake, where there's the call, there's the voice, knocking on the door, right? And then if you remember, in kol dodido fake, the woman doesn't answer the door, right? She's, I'm too tired, and how we create fantasies in our minds. Like his fantasy, he thought, Petach Rishon Bar Yochai, and like it's in the least expected place sometimes. And fantasy is not as glorified as we think. And sometimes, it could be found in the worst spot ever. But we don't really understand, right? We have a vision, and we make the vision so perfect that we don't really understand it, because when it comes, we don't really, right? It's too not real. Maybe it goes back to that theme of this world that's going to be so not real and not based in reality at all. And about this idea of fantasies and that, he has to understand that really, right, it could be anytime, anywhere, and you have to be ready for it, right? Like if you think it's going to be a certain way and then it comes and it's not the way you expected it, you're not going to want it. So you have to be very open about it and very open to understanding that there's all different ways that this could be. And she develops the idea very nicely, but you could listen to the shiur. She says better than me. Anyway, that's one thing. I was thinking of something else here. Um, uh, So I'm going to remember. Okay, let's move on. So now Shalu Talmidav Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma. Ematai ben David ba. So now they ask Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma another story. They say, when is the Mashiach coming? Mityareani shema tivakshu mimeni ot. So this again is a bit of a strange story. He says, listen, I'm worried you're going to ask me, once I tell you the answer, you're going to ask me to show you some sign to prove that, like we go back to the Nevi Sheker, that I'm not lying. Amrulo, ein anu mivakshim mimcha ot. So they said, no, we're not going to ask you for any sign. So, okay, he says, fine, I'll tell you. Amar lahem, l'chashipol ashar ezeh v'yibaneh, v'yipol v'yibaneh v'yipol. Okay, when this gate falls, and then that's up, is rebuilt, falls, is rebuilt, and falls. Ve'emas bekim lifnoto ad sheben David ban. Before we rebuild it again, Ben David will come. Okay, that's a way of saying there will be a number of calamities that will befall the Jewish people. They'll get up again, they'll fall, get up, fall, and then the Mashiach will come. Amrulo, Rabbeinu, tein lanu ot. So now they say, give us a sign that you're telling the truth. Now, right? They said, we're not going to ask you for a sign. It was exactly what he was worried about. Amar lahem v'lo kach amartem li she'en atem mevakshim mimeni ot. Didn't you tell me you're not going to ask me for a sign? Amrulo, v'af al pichem. They said, well, in any case, give us a sign. Very strange. Amar lahem, im ken yapchu me ma'arat pamyas l'dam. So they say to him, he says to them, sorry, you want a sign? The waters of the Pamyas, which is the Banyas, okay, if you've ever been to the Banyas in the north, in Israel, the waters of the Banyas will turn to blood, and V'nefchu l'dam. And in fact, they did. Read up about the Banyas if you're interested in flashback this week. Bishat ptirato amar lahem. When he died, he said to them, Ha'amiku li aroni. Put my coffin very deep down in the earth. Bury it really deep. Why? There's not going to be a single palm tree in Babylonia, that there won't be a horse of the Persians tied to it. And the people from Madai are going to come to Israel, and they're going to remove all the bodies from the graves and use it to put the food for their animals. And basically, I want to be deep down so that they don't come and uproot me when they come to fight. And what you see here is he had a real vision, right? This is similar to the previous story where you have to really believe it's going to happen. He really believed it was going to happen, so much so that he asked them to bury him so deep down because he had this vision of what it was going to look like, when it was going to happen, what it was going to look like, and and that's, again, this strong belief in understanding the Mashiach is really going to come. And this is obviously talking about the Milchama of Gog and Magog, the fight, that's a big, huge fight that's going to be because the Persians and the people from Madai, I think they're Medes, I forget exactly how you pronounce it, but they're going to come in mass to Israel to fight. Okay. Amar Ein Ben David ba, we're back to this. The Mashiach won't come until there will be 9 months. Okay, again, we're getting back to the Chevlei Leida, pangs of childbirth, until the Malchut HaRisha'ah, the evil Malchut, which is usually, again, a reference to Rome, but again, who knows who will be in the future, will rule for 9 months. Shene'amar lachen yitnem ad 8 yoleda yilada be'et yeter echad yeshuvun al b'nei Yisrael. So it will be like the time that it takes for a person to have a woman to have a child, and then they will all come back. Okay, there will be the shuvah. Okay, shuvun al b'nei Israel. Now we get to a slew of rabbis. We're going to see Ula, Rabbah, and later we're going to see Rabbi Yochanan, who all basically say the Chevlei Mashiach are going to be so bad that we don't want to see it. We don't want to be alive when it happens. So Amar Ula, and they all say the same words. Yete velo ichmine. Ichmine is from I don't want to see it. Yete is to come. Let it come, but I don't want to see it. I don't want to be alive when it happens. V'chein amar Rabba, yete velo achmine. Rav Yosef amar, yete ve'ezke de'ete betula dechufita dechamare. He says, I wanted to come, and I want to be there, and I'm happy to be zochet, to merit, to sit in the shade of the dung of the donkey. Okay? He's saying, I'm happy to be in the worst of the worst places, the most disgusting place, right next to the dung. What can be more disgusting than that? I'm happy to see what's going on and be part of it. First of all, he couldn't see. Remember, he was blind. Anyway, Amar le'abai le'rabba. My time. What's the reason? Ilema. So now they want to go back to Rabbi, who doesn't want to see this. And Abaye says to him, I don't understand why you don't want to see this. Remember, Abaye was adopted by Rabbi. Ilema mishum chevlo shel Mashiach. It's because you're worried about the chevle Mashiach and all the bad things. Va'atanya, it says in a Braita. Shalu tamidav et Rabbi Elazar. Ma yaseh adam v'yinatzel mechevlo shel Mashiach. What should a person do to save themselves from these terrible things that will happen before the Mashiach comes? Yasok b'torah u'b'gemilu chasadim. Learn Torah and do chesed. Umar ha Torah v'hagemilu chasadim. And you learn Torah and you do gemilu chasadim. So what are you worried about? You're going to be saved. Amar le Shem yigrom hachet. Says, I'm worried that maybe some sin I have will cause me to get punished along with everyone else. How do we know that this is a thing? Okay, now we're going to prove that there's such a concept that someone could be very worthy, but if they do some sin, they could get punished. Kid Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, as Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi says to Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi Rami, he brought a contradiction between two psukim. And this is with Yaakov. Remember when he goes on his way, Ktiv hine anochi imach ushmarticha b'chol asher telech. Right? It says, God says, I'm with you and I'll protect you in everything you do. Now it says later on, a few prakim later, Vayira uktiv, Vayira Yaakov ma'ov vayitzer lo. He was scared. He was very worried. Right? Why was he worried if God said he'd protect him? Because he was worried that maybe he did something wrong and that would cause him to get punished. Kiditanya, another source that shows this, like it says in the following Braita, Ad Yavoram Hashem. Okay, this is in Shirat Hayam. Ad Yavoram Hashem, Ad Yavoram Zukanita. Now, it says the same thing kind of twice, right? Until Yavor, the nation of God, until the Yavor, the nation that you acquire. Now, what are we talking about? Going into the land, right? Yavor, they're going to go into the land. To the emu v'tita emu lahar nachalatcha, right? The end of the pasuk is you're going to go into the land. So they say, why is it repeated? Now, why is it repeated? Poetry repeats the same things and in a little bit of a different way, right? Just look at Tehillim in what we say in Hala, where we repeat the same sentences. Sometimes we repeat them the exact same way. Sometimes they're repeated. They're actually not usually repeated the exact. Sometimes they're repeated the exact same way. Sometimes they're repeated, right, with minor variations. That's what it sounds like here. But what does the Braita say about this? Ad Yavoram Hashem, the first time Zobiyah Rishonah. That's the first time they went into the land, right? There's two times the Jews went into the land. Ad Yavoram Zukanita, Zobiyah Shniah, in the time of Ezra, right? There's Yehoshua, and then there's Ezra. Emor Me'ata, Ru'uyim, Hayu Yisrael, Asolem Nes, B'biyah Shniah, Kibiyah Rishonah. Now, what happened the first time they crossed over the Jordan? There was a miracle, right? They were able to cross over through the water. So, just like they came in miraculously the first time, they should have come in miraculously the second time, and they didn't. So, Ela Shagaram Hachet. They say, why didn't they come the second time? In other words, the fact that the psukim are putting these two things together as if they're the same shows that they should have been the same. But in the end, they weren't the same. And why is that? Because it must be the sin caused it not to be the same. In the second temple, the return for the second temple. Okay. Back to these people who don't want to see. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan also said, lo achmine. Let it happen, but I don't want to see it. And this time, Rish Lakish questions Rabbi Yochanan. Amar le Rish Lakish, my time. What's the reason? No, he's going to say something different. Not, are you worried? And why should you be worried? But he says it like this. Ilema mishum dichtiv. If it is because you're worried about the pasuk that says, "Ka'asher yanus ish mipi ha'aryeh upka'o hadov." It's like a person who's running away from a lion and then bumps into a bear, right? Imagine you're scared of the lion. You've managed to get away from the lion, but the next thing you meet is a bear. Uba habayit. Then the guy comes home, finished running away from the bear, was safe, and the bear gets into his or her house. V'samach yado al akir u'neshachon nachash. Puts her hand on the wall and gets bitten by a snake. So, sounds like, right? You just can't get away from the problems. Well, he says, I'll show you. This is going on in our world. In other words, his question is, what are you so worried about? This is already happening. You're already living it. Okay, now let's see what he says here. Why are you living it? So he says, Bizman shadam yotze l'sadeh upagabo santal. Okay, so it's like someone goes out to the field, and then he meets the guy who's measuring out the land and wants to take away some of his property. Okay, that's already problem number one. That's the Ari. People who are out there measuring and saying, oh, this land isn't yours, and trying to seize your property. Domeh kemish pagabo Ari. That's like someone who met a lion. Nichnas la'ir, he goes back to the city, because remember, the fields were outside the city. Pagabo gabai. Who does he meet? The tax collector, right? These are all monetary problems, which we always, there's a difference between monetary problems and physical problems. But okay, right? They say it's just money, even though money is something. But the tax collector comes and, says, you owe money. That's like someone who meets a bear. Nichnas lebeito, but here you get to the real problems. Matzah banavu benotam mutalim bera'av. Okay, and he finds his family dying of famine. Doesn't say dying, but people could die of famine. And domela misha nishachon nachash. Okay, then he gets home and he realizes the problems are really serious at home. Ela mishum dichti. So he says, so what are you worried about? Now the answer is very hard to understand, and there's a lot of different ways the commentaries try to explain this. I'm not going to promise to do this justice. I might be left with a little lack of clarity, but basically Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, I'm not worried about things like that. I'm worried about something worse. Now, why is this worse? Unclear. We're going to talk about it, though, try to understand. And again, there's different ways of understanding this. Ela mishum dichtiv, it's because it says, Sha'aluna u're'u im yoled zachar, madua re'ita kol gever yadav chalatzav kayoleda. Okay, let's see if a male can give birth, because I saw a man with his hands on his loins like a woman giving birth in terrible pains, and his face turned green. Okay, so what does this mean? My ra'iti kol gever. Amar Bar Yitzchak Amar Rav Misha Kol Gvura Shelo. What is a gever here? Kol gever. It's someone who has all the strength. Who's that? God. Okay, so God is going to be suffering, and it could be you could just explain it like this: that this is bad because we're suffering, but in the future, God is going to be suffering, and that's going to be too much for me to handle. What does it mean? His face turned green. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Pamalya Shamala Upamalya Shamata. Okay, it's going to be Kol Panim means all faces, meaning the people up above and the people down below. Okay, they're all going to be upset. Why? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu halalu maaseh yadai v'halalu maaseh yadai he'ach abed elu mipnei elu. In other words, in this big war, it's going to be the Jews against the Gentiles, the enemy. And they're going to kill each other. And for God, it's going to be very sad. Because even if the Jewish people prevail, right, it's still his Maaseh Yadai, creatures he created are being killed. And that's going to be very painful for God. That's one way of explaining it. Some people explain it more centered on the struggles, the suffering of the Jewish people, particularly that they're going to be wiped out by the Gentiles in this big war. It's unclear exactly what it means. And it's even a little more unclear from the example they're going to bring. Amar of Papa. Hainu Amrei Nashe Rahit V'Nafal Torah. If your ox, which is a very useful animal, runs away, right, runs and then falls and dies, and then you don't have an ox to replace it with, you're going to put a horse in, which is not as useful as an ox, but it's second best. And that sounds like perhaps it's talking about the Jews will be destroyed, the Gentiles will come in place. They're second best, and your second best becomes what you have then, and then you get used to it, and then. It's like God will get used to, like he likes the Gentiles as well. They'll just take our place and it will, that will just become the new norm. Okay. It's all unclear how this relates to Rabbi Yochanan, what exactly is bothering him about this and what all these lines mean, but we'll go with as much as I was able to interpret here. Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav, Atidin Yisrael da'achle shnei Mashiach. There's two ways you can read the sentence, like where the stress in the sentence is. The first way they're going to read it is the stress like this. So I'm reading it the first way. In the future, the Jews, stress on the Jews, will benefit from the years of the Mashiach. Okay, sounds like as opposed to the Gentiles. So Amar Rav Yosef Pshita, Elaman Achilahu, who else would enjoy the Mashiach, right? The Mashiach is really for us. Who else would enjoy it? Here comes a funny line today. Chilik ubilik achlelahu. Chilik and bilik are going to eat it. Okay, chilik and bilik. Remember, then we're going to meet them back in when we get to chulin. It's also used. It's like a way of saying, like, two anonymous people that we don't even know who the heck they are. Chilik and bilik. I don't know why they made up those names, chilik and bilik, but it was maybe a thing people used. But you think chilik and bilik are going to eat it? Of course, the Jews are going to eat it. Who else would? Who else would benefit from all the plenty and the amazing things that are going to be? So they explained, no, what he meant was, La'afuke to Rabbi Hillel, da'amal, ein Mashiach l'Yisrael, shekvar achluhu b'yimei Chizkiah. Rabbi Hillel said there's not going to be Mashiach for Israel because they already ate everything. They enjoyed all the benefits of the Mashiach in the time of Chizkiah. Remember, Chizkiah was supposed to be the Mashiach, and there was a lot of good that happened, right? They were saved from Sanhedrin and all that. And it's done. Okay, now either it means, not that the Mashiach isn't going to come, but all the plenty that goes with the Mashiach was already given to the Jews in the time of Chizkiah, and they won't get it anymore. And therefore, what he was saying is, no, Atidin Yisrael da'achle shnei Mashiach, focus on achle shnei Mashiach. There will be plentiful in the time of the Mashiach. So either it means the Mashiach is going to come, or it means even when the Mashiach comes, don't worry that there won't be plenty because it was already, the Jews got the reward of it already. No, it didn't happen yet. And that's because Rabbi Hillel thought, right, claimed it did, but this is to go against that. Amarav. Lo Ibre Alma. Now we get to something else, which is who is the most important, okay? Who is the most important person that was ever created or will be created? Okay, that's the key. For who is the world created? And there's this idea that the world was created for one moment in time or one person in history. So we have a three-way debate. Rav says, Lo Ivre Alma Ela LeDavid. The world was created only for David. Shmuel Amar LeMoshe. Since it was all for Moshe. Rabbi Yochanan Amar LaMashiach. Okay. Now we get to Mashmo, and this is very interesting, although, again, hard to understand. What is the Mashiach's name? Okay, why do they want to put a name to it? I think they want people, again, to make it all more tangible and more understandable. So what did they do? Each Beit Midrash gives it the name of their teacher, okay? So it's a way I think of people understanding, oh, it's someone like this. And had we been worthy, he would have been the Mashiach. Okay, right. We know all throughout times there's people who claim they were the Mashiach, where people wanted to make people the Mashiach. Mashmo, Debei Rabbi Shila Shmo. Debei Rabbi Shila Amre, in the house, in the school of Rabbi Shila, the Beit Midrash of him, they said Shilo Shmo. Okay, Rabbi Shila, they said it was Shilo. Shneimar Ad Ki Yavo Shilo, and they bring a pasuk to prove it, right? Until Shilo comes. Debei Rabbi Yanai Amre, Inon Shmo, right? These are all just words with the same root. Shneimar Yehushmo la'olam, Yehushmo la'olam, Lifnei Shemesh Inon Shmo. Okay, his name is Inon. There we have it. Debei Rabbi Chanina Amar, Chanina Shmo. Okay, very clear, right? In the house of Rabbi Chanina, they said it's Chanina. Shneimar Asher lo aten lachem Chanina. Right? This is saying you're not going to get the Mashiach right now. Yesh omrim. This is weird because this comes without a name of a Beit Midrash, and it's also weird because they give him a name Ben someone, which is strange because the Ben doesn't appear anywhere in the pasuk. Yesh omrim Menachem ben Chizkiah Shmo. So I don't have a good explanation why they say Chizkiah, but Shene'emal, right, the son of Chizkiah, Shene'emal ki rachak mimeni Menachem meshiv nafshi. Okay, because it's far from me the Menachem that will bring back my soul. Okay, so from there they say, Menachem is the Mashiach. Rabbanan Amre Chivara Debe Rebbe Shmo, and the rabbis said it's the chivara. Some people say that means the white, meaning he was leprous. Okay, he's called the leper from the house of Rebbe. Shenemar Achen Cholyenu Hu Nasau Machovenu Spalam. This is talking about the Mashiach will suffer. Umachovenu, right? He kind of carries the burden of our sins upon him. Va'anachnu chashavnuhu nagua muka Elohim u'meuneh. We viewed him as nagua, like he had leprosy or had, injuries, muka, he was like struck from God and suffered. So here you have, they say, it's chivar debei Rebbe. Now, why debei Rebbe? Some people say because Rebbe suffered in his life also. If you remember his death story, right? He has a lot of stomach pains and he's always going to the bathroom with the tefillin and the whole story, if you remember that. But anyway, it's a little unclear here where this comes from. Amar Rav Nachman. Now, Rav Nachman says, Imin Chayahu, if he's from people who are alive today, meaning he's living among us right now, Kigon Ana. He says it would be someone like me. Okay, it sounds arrogant, but he's trying to explain to them what this would be. Okay, which is the someone who's glorified, someone who's a ruler, and basically Rav Nachman also was married into, if you remember, he married Yalta, who was the daughter of the Reish Galuta, who had the prominence. And he also was someone people listened to. He was always judging people. He was the big, very prominent judge. So it'd be someone like me who has power. Amarav, Imin Chayahu, Kigon Rabbi. And I don't think he was saying he was Mashiach. He was just trying to, I think, tell people this is the kind of person that it's going to be. Amarav, he says also, Imin Chayahu, Kigon Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So Rav says it's like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the generation before him, was his teacher. Imimatu, if he's already dead, right, and he'll come back to life and come back in the form of the Mashiach, Kigon Daniel Ish Chamudo. Okay, and he mentions Daniel. Again, the commentaries try to figure out what's similar about them. Also, both of them suffered, and that's possibly why. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Atid Akadosh Baruch Hu la'amid lahem David Acher. Okay, now we're going to see there's going to be two Davids in the future. There's going to be David is going to be, resurrected from the dead, and there's going to be this new Mashiach, son of David. How do we know this? Shenemar Avdu et Hashem Elohehem ve'et David malkam asher akim lahem. Now notice it says in David Malkam that I will place upon them. Now what do you mean? He was already alive, right? Hikim lo ne'emar. It's not David HaMelech that I put upon you, but this goes back to when we kept saying Tchiyat HaMetim in Torah, Ela Akim, I will. So I will return him. Doesn't it say David will be the Nasi? So what about the Ben David, the Mashiach? So they say Kigon Kesaru Palge Kesar. It's like the president, the vice president, right? So one will be in charge. That will be the Ben Mashiach, but David will also be there underneath him. Tarash Rabbi Simlai. Last thing for today, which really will continue into tomorrow. My dichtiv hoy hamitavim et Yom Hashem. Lama lachem Yom Zeh. Okay, hoy to those who are waiting for the Yom Hashem. Lama zelachem Yom Hashem. What do you need Yom Hashem for? Choshech velo or. It's darkness and not light. So what is this talking about? I mean, aren't we all waiting for that day? Mashal l'tarnagol v'atalef shayu mitzapin laor. It's like a rooster and a bat that are waiting for the light. Amar l'tarnagol v'atalef ani mitzapeh laora shora shelihi. I'm waiting for the light because the light is for me. But ata lama l'cha ora. What do you need the light for? You, right? You sleep during the day and you need nighttime. That's what you need. So what he's saying is, what are you waiting for this for? This is going to be bad for you when the light comes. So that's what they're saying about the Gentiles. If the Gentiles are waiting for Yom Hashem, it's not going to be very good for them, right? For us, it's going to be good, but it's like saying to the Gentiles, why are you waiting for this? This isn't going to be very good for you. Okay, and we'll continue this idea tomorrow. So what do we have today? We started with the idea of we finished with the two approaches to, is there a set time or is it depend on tshuva, which we then later revisited about. There's two tracks, right? Two ways it could come. Either when you do tshuva, it'll come quickly. Otherwise, it'll come in its time. We also went to a lot of signs, some good, some bad, about what is going to be before the Mashiach comes and what are signs that the Mashiach is coming, which again, could possibly be understood as ways to give people hope when they're struggling through difficult times, right? And the idea from the stories, certainly, we saw Rabbi Yehoshua and Levi, especially this idea of always hoping for it and never, right, never losing your hope that it's going to come and that it could come any day and in any form and in any way, and be prepared for that. And then we ended with what's the name of the Mashiach, and then we ended with this idea about there'll be two Davids, and then the issue of what are the Gentiles waiting for if it's not really going to be very good for them. And we'll get back to that idea tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day, and with a note of hope to end our morning, to end our learning with, of the hope of the Mashiach coming and there being redemption for the Jewish people.